Welcome to part two of this series. I was going to cover benchmarks and things like that, but I wanted to first do a video about setup and configuring SSH and doing basic hardware tests to see if these overheat or not. These are actually running already, and I'm connected to them, and there's benchmarks in progress, so they're a little bit warm. I also wanted to talk about what one viewer said, that one advantage of the Raspberry Pi is the GPIO ports, which, yes, it's a big advantage if you're doing hardware stuff. That being said, for instance, here's one little board. It's called the MSP430. It's made by Texas Instruments, I believe. And the kit of this board, including the buttons, and it's got LEDs built in and the temperature monitor built in, and they give you a crystal in the pack, and these lovely headers, and you can either solder them on, or you get a nice lovely package, and this entire package costs £4, and you can connect it via the USB to your MK804 to get all the hardware interfacing you want to do. Just saying, it's still an advantage to the Raspberry Pi, but this is an awesome little board that people that do hardware should definitely look at. It's not Atmel, so things like the Arduino and things like that might have a larger sort of community, larger support, but if you're looking for the best value for money, this is fantastic. Okay, so now I'm gonna jump over to the PC and show you what was involved in installing everything and getting everything running. One last thing I wanted to say before we move on to the PC is this already has the SD card built in, and it has the 16 gigabyte SD card, and everything is flush, everything is very clean looking. You can put this anywhere and it's not going to draw attention to itself, whereas this does protrude. The composite protrudes. You got the protruding SD card, which could possibly be snapped off. You've got obviously the network cable, and yeah, it's just a much bigger, much kind of bulkier setup. Also, this has a tiny little power connector, whereas this has the full size, well, not full size, but the mini USBs they use to charge phones. But yeah, just bear in mind, I'm going to jump over to the PC now and show you the installation process. I just wanted to quickly run through the installation process. I'm not going to harp on about it too much. There are guides and other videos and resources online. But on a basic level, just go to raspberrypi.org/downloads, and they have Linux distributions here. You can just download and follow the installation instructions. With the miniand, you can with the MK802, you can go to the miniand.com website, and if you select products MK802 and then guides, install Ubuntu Linux 12.04, you have this lovely forum post with images, and they have the Linux distributions ready for download and ready to just copy over to the SD card, including installation instructions. Quick note, if you're installing on a Mac, you will need to identify which disk your SD card shows up as. Quickest way is plug in the SD card and it will show up in Finder. Then if you go into your terminal and you run df-h, it's going to show you all the partitions and all the disks that you have. In my case, the SD card is /dev/disk5, so we will need to use that when copying the image across. So now if we jump over to the directory where we've downloaded the images, so we can see we have the two images. This is the Ubuntu for MK802, and this is the Debian for the Raspberry Pi. So to copy, I've already done this, but you run sudo dd. The time is just to see how long it takes for demonstration purposes. So you do sudo dd if equals the image file you want to copy, block copy directly onto the SD card, and of equals the device, so that's the disk 5 I mentioned earlier. Another thing is you might want to add block size equal 1024K. Strictly speaking, it's not required, but it's going to speed things up a lot because SD cards deal with larger block sizes much better than the default small block sizes. So this took almost 160 seconds. So not too bad, not the fastest SD card, but it will do for our case. And yeah, so this is you literally, after this is done, you take out the SD cards, throw them into the Raspberry Pi and MK802, and you should be able to boot into Linux. I've jumped ahead slightly here. I have terminal windows open, and I'm connected to both the Raspberry Pi and the MK802, and we can see a brief difference here. This is running StrongArm version 6, this is running version 7. But ironically, the Debian is using a newer version. I guess they're using an unstable branch of Debian, whereas the MK802 is using the slightly older kernel version in Ubuntu. So a quick look, let's have a look at top. Let's see what's running by default. Stored by memory, we can see this is running an X server and OpenBox and all kinds of things. This isn't running very much, it's just a command line interface, just a very basic. But really we'll be getting the MK802 to the same kind of level as the Raspberry Pis. This is a server environment and we don't really care about the graphical user interface. I wanted to briefly explain how I got to this to the current stage. On the MK802, when you get the graphical user interface, you can just log in with a mini-and default password, open a terminal and type in apt-get install SSH, and this is all you need to do. It's already installed in this case, but this will do everything you need to do to get SSH access. From there, you can just set your password. Misspelled password. So you set it. I'm going to be logging in as root because I'm just testing and benchmarking. Not the best practice, but for benchmarks, it's fine. So I'm setting a root password, and from then on, I can just check my IP address, and then from a different PC, connect to this IP address. Actually, strangely, the first time I connected, the IP address that showed up wasn't the one that I had to connect to. I'm not sure if it's a bug or... I mean, I've noticed another thing when I don't have any packets being sent backwards and forwards on the wireless. It does shut off the wireless from inactivity. I'll need to figure out how to stop that from happening. But as a temporary solution, what I've done is I'm just running a loop that prints time every second. And that keeps the wireless up. And yeah, it's a quick workaround for now. Don't need to do very much on the Raspberry. Well, on the Raspberry Pi to get SSH is a bit more complicated, but there's no idle network issue like with the MK802. On the Raspberry Pi, if you want to get SSH working, it's not as straightforward. You need to follow the instructions on this page. I'll post a link to it in the show notes. But it involves generating a keygen and then changing the bootloader to load SSH. It seems a bit bizarre and a bit non-standard. But once you have SSH installed on both, you'll just be able to connect to both over local network and see what I'm seeing. Now, a quick test. Let's see how hot these devices get and how reliable they are. So just the quickest way to load up the CPU is just to run while true do continue done, which is just going to run while true loop, a while loop, doing nothing, but this slows the CPU to 100%. So I'm running it on both, and let's double check in top to see that is indeed the case. And we'll see it's pretty much at 100% or near enough. SSH and top use up a bit of CPU as well. So now I'm going to jump over to the camera and we'll see what the devices look like when they're fully loaded. I have both devices running here and they're both loaded to 100%, so the casing is starting to get a little bit warm, especially with the MK802. It's a much smaller case with far more restrictive airflow. But let's have a look. They've been both loaded to 100% CPU for the past 20 minutes or so. So I'm going to get my temperature probe and let's have a look. I have my handy cheapo eBay temperature monitor, infrared non-contact temperature monitor. So if I point it at the MK802, we can see that it's quite warm, and we're peaking at 50 degrees. Let's flip it over, and again close to 50, and on the front we're peaking out about 50. 54 even, it jumped briefly. Let's look at the Raspberry Pi. The case doesn't really hug the board, so the casing doesn't get nearly as warm, but neither case is too hot to touch, and we're looking at maybe 10 degrees difference between these two devices. If I open up the casing, let's have a look what we get. So bear in mind, both are loaded to 100. Well, both CPUs are loaded to 100%. So this should be as hot as the device will ever get. And yeah, I mean, we're looking at roughly comparable temperatures here. If the casing is showing 50 and this is showing 54 without the casing, I think give or take, these are about the same. I'm going to let this run for a few hours to see what the reliability is like. But I don't expect to see any problems even at this sort of crazy load. You will never really have these devices loaded 24/7 at 100% CPU. But it's nice to know that they don't overheat and nothing catastrophic happens with them. Just feeling it in the hand, it's warm. It's almost like a hand warmer, but it's not hot. I'm not worried about this in the slightest.